It's about. There we are. That's the notification that the recording is started. So thank you, everybody. Thanks for joining us here today. So we're about 3 or 4 minutes past the hour now. So I think, from what I can see, the attendees numbers have steadily crept up, but they're starting to kind of plateau now. So I think we should get started. So welcome, everybody. Welcome to this FAIR Impact Open Call for Support promotional webinar for the open calls. My name is Ryan O'Connor. I'm a research data specialist at the Digital Curation Centre based at the DCC, and I'm leading the work on the open calls for this open calls for support for this FAIR Impact project. And I'll be introducing you to the open calls today, and introducing you a bit later to the specific support actions that we'll be offering. So just first, before we get started, just a few housekeeping notes. So as you have heard, this session is being recorded. So we'll be distributing the full recording of the session later on, when it's that has been processed, and we'll also be producing segmented versions as well, just so you can kind of catch up with the individual segments if you need them. As well as that, the presentation materials, so the slides, and that will be made available after the session, and they'll be on the Zenodo community, so the FAIR Impact project community, and I'll add that link into the chat, or into the Q&A function later, so you all have access to it. So just before we start, I think it would be good to give a sort of overview of who is here today, and just so you can have a better idea of who your fellow attendees are and where people are joining from. So we have over 100 people registered for the webinar. We've not quite hit that number yet today, but we are from about I think it's 27 different countries around the world. It's obviously mainly kind of from Europe, seeing as the project is a Europe-based project, but also from have attendees registered from Asia and the Middle East. Just looking a bit closer at the countries in Europe that are joining us today, obviously a lot of attendees from Netherlands and Italy and Denmark as well. I think Ireland and the UK, Germany and Finland, and Romania. So good to see a good spread of the entire continent. So when you were signing up for the webinar, the attendees, you informed us that you're working at various different organizations. So people working at service provider organizations and different data infrastructures, at national level initiatives, at research community organizations, research performing and funding organizations, people working as policymakers, and people involved in different scientific societies and academies. So we have a really good sort of wide breadth of people working in different roles in attendance today. So just to go through the kind of overall purpose of today's webinar. So what I'll first do is I'll just give an overview of the open calls for support. So I'll include a summary of the overall sort of FAIR Impact project aims, and how the open calls for support specifically fit into those project aims. I'll then hand over to my colleague Clément Jonquet, who will introduce the first support action, the FAIR Impact Fairness Assessment Challenge. After that, Stian Swaland-Hayes will introduce the second support action. So that is titled Enabling FAIR Signposting and RO-Crate for Content and Metadata Discovery and Consumption. So following these presentations, then my colleague Sarah Pittonet will talk us through the application process, including the platform that will be used to kind of to gather the applications and what information you need to provide as part of your application. Finally, then at the end, we'll have a few minutes to take any of your questions. Any questions you have, either those directly for the support action providers, on questions you might have on the application process, or just on the open calls in general. So as I said, throughout the session, you will have access that the Q&A function will be open. So at any point, if you have any questions, please feel free to add them in there, and we'll get to them towards the end of the session. So just moving on to look at some of the partner organizations. As I said, this project is following on from a previous European funded project that was FAIR is FAIR. So the FAIR Impact project is a lot of the kind of same partners. I think there's 27 or 28 partners across 11 different countries involved. So that we obviously have a kind of wide spread of expertise involved in the project. So just moving on to look at a bit more briefly at the overall sort of objectives of the FAIR Impact project. So the full title of the project itself is Expanding FAIR Solutions Across Europe. Just going back a slide. There we are, sorry, wrong slide. Yeah, so the full title of the project is Expanding FAIR Solutions Across Europe. So the aim of the project is to realize a fair European Open Science Cloud, or EOSC, by supporting the implementation of FAIR enabling practices across different scientific communities and across different research outputs at the European level, but also at national and institutional levels. So the ways we're going about doing this is by identifying sort of current and emerging components for enabling FAIR. So the types of components we have in mind here, things like different practices and policies, methods, standards, and technical specifications. So another way we're going about this, the overall aims of the project, is by translating these sort of what we've identified as these viable solutions or guidelines and frameworks, and taking these and translating them from one domain or research output focus and supporting their application in different domains or contexts. And finally, one of the ways we're kind of achieving or aim to achieve our overall objectives is by taking the next step in the FAIR implementation by defining the support, governance, and coordination mechanisms required to ensure the continuous function of FAIR enabling practices in EOSC. So yeah, as I said, the FAIR Impact project, we're following on from in part from a previous European Commission funded project that some of you may be aware of. As I said, the FAIR's FAIR project. So there are many of the same partner organizations who took part in FAIR's FAIR taking part in this project. As you can see in the FAIR Impact project, we have 28 partners and affiliate entities contributing to our work, withdrawn from 11 countries across Europe. The project is it's about 9 months old now, so having started in June 2022, and it's due to wrap up in the middle of 2025, so 36-month project in all. So just looking in a bit more detail at what we're aiming to do with the open calls. So our broad objective here is to boost the uptake of FAIR principles through this dedicated support program. So through this series of open calls, you can apply to implement a selection of current tools and methods and receive financial support to enable your participation. So this financial support is to be used solely for the support and the staff time to carry out the activity. We'll be launching 3 open calls over the lifetime of the project, aiming to support around 50 organizations, ensuring that different sort of domains and geographic areas and stakeholder groups are represented across these 3 open calls. Another one important thing to note is that applicants must reside and/or work in the European Union or associated country for the duration of the grant. But as I said earlier, we'll cover the application process in a bit more detail later. But a lot of the information on the kind of different stipulations and application criteria are covered in the frequently asked questions section of the open calls page on the FAIR Impact website. So as we've seen, there's a really kind of large amount of partners involved in FAIR Impact with a really wide range of expertise across different domains and disciplines. So we know from experience from the FAIR's FAIR project and from the other different areas that all our colleagues are involved in, is that there's an increasingly large amount of FAIR enabling resources available to those who are sort of keen to implement FAIR principles in their work. So if you're looking to make your data, your methods, or other research outputs more FAIR, nowadays it is likely that there's something that might be of use to you or some resource that can help you do this. However, we do know from experience that it can be challenging to know which of these FAIR enabling tools or approaches or methods to use for different purposes and how they can be implemented most effectively. So essentially what we're doing with these open calls for support is drawing on the expertise of our colleagues and partners involved in the project to come up with really kind of practical ways to apply these different resources, either extending their use in their sort of original domains and contexts, and also adapting them for use in others, so supporting you in that process. The support actions that you'll hear about today are clearly defined. These kind of clearly defined approaches that will help successful applicants learn how to use the specific tools and methods and approaches, helping you to start or to continue your journey to becoming more fair. So this open call now will open on the 31st of March, so later on this week. The call will remain open for approximately 2 months and close on the 1st of June. As I said, my colleague Sarah will talk us through the application platform and process later on in the webinar. And just finally, as well, just before I hand over to Clement and Sophie for the first presentation. So as well as these 3 open calls for support taking place over the course of the FAIR Impact project, later this year we'll be launching an open call for in-kind support. So this in-kind support program will begin in January 2024 and will consist of a series of kind of virtual workshops where participants will carry out self-assessments of their current capabilities and develop action plans to improve on different areas. There will be support programs for research performing organizations, for repositories and other data service providers, and for national level initiatives. As I said, there'll be more information available on this open call later on in the year, so on the FAIR Impact website, so watch out for that. And finally, as well, just to highlight for you, there was a I just wanted to draw your attention to the project's EOSC FAIR Champions. So we recently closed an open call for these FAIR Champions who will act as ambassadors for FAIR, engaging their communities and advocating for the adoption of the FAIR Impact project results. The champions will be announced soonish, hopefully in the next week or so. So please keep an eye on the FAIR Impact website and newsletter for this. So now I'll just hand over to my colleague Clement, who should be here and who will be presenting the first support action. That's the FAIR Impact Fairness Assessment Challenge. So Clement.
Yeah, I'm here, Ryan. Thanks for the introduction. Sorry for the colleagues and the attendees. I was not there about 10 minutes ago. So I've done it a little bit the old school way without preparation of any support. So the key idea being to present and discuss a little bit exactly the support offer number 1. So I'm assuming that if we have a total of 1 hour, Ryan, you probably mentioned that I will take about 5 or 10 minutes and I have time to take questions to present every offer, or?
Yeah, 10 to 15 minutes should be fine, and we can take questions at the end of the session.
Okay. So let's try to be sure to keep room for some question either right after or at the end as you organize that. So I will invite the attendees to go on the FAIR Impact website and just follow with me maybe the support letter number 1. So can we talk to the panel? Yeah, get access to the. Yeah, no, the Zoom will be only for the panelists. I'm assuming someone can share the links to all of the attendees. And so, yeah, spectators that will be here. Can you confirm, Ryan? Can you know to do that, to transfer a link to all the panelists or all the participants?
I will look. I'll try and get that.
Yeah,
done now while you're speaking.
So, well, if you make it to this call, so I'm assuming you will know where the FAIR Impact website with the open call and support letter description is here. So basically the idea here is to create an environment in which we can evaluate the level of fairness, which is kind of a topic in FAIR Impact and in the work package 4, also in the work package 5 for sure. And the idea behind this support offer is to put the participant in a context where they will themselves evaluate with some of the tools that we provide, tools and methods, themselves evaluate the resources that they will bring inside their application, and then we'll help them in do that fairness evaluation, and then the overall goal of the supporter offer is to increase the level of fairness throughout the period of 1 month of the different participation in the meetings. So let me explain in more detail. The key idea is that the applicants come with a set of resources. So typically we've described in the call datasets, semantic artifacts, or any collection of those. The key idea is that we want the applicants to come with something that they can evaluate the fairness on which something they can evaluate the fairness level. We, as FAIR Impact, will provide a set of tools and methods. Some of them that are listed here are called Fuji, FAIR, or FOOPs. Those are tools and methods that can be used to evaluate the level of fairness of a digital object. More specifically speaking, FAIR and FOOPs are dedicated to semantic artifacts, vocabularies, and ontologies and terminologies, and we'll also focus have a little focus on that during the context of the support offer. And so with the help of those tools and methods, I said tools and methods because some of the tools, some of them are like real tools that will run into a software like FOOPs or FAIR or Fuji. Some others are approach, like some others are self-assessment approach, like FDMM, or guidelines and principles that someone can follow, like the 10 simple rules for fair vocabularies paper that is referenced there. We believe that in FAIR Impact, we have a group of people, kind of, let's say, expert in those procedures and those questions that can help the applicants in first evaluating their level of fairness, then go offline and help them to improve the level of fairness, and then go back online with everyone in the context of a final workshop, and then compare the increase in the level of fairness of the resources that were brought by the applicants. The key idea is that you come with your resources and you work on your resources, so the total benefit is on your side. On our side, it's only the teaching or the explanation aspect. So we describe in the letter the form the form, especially that is Zoom on the screen right now. We'll expect 3 workshops, and so the offer letter is to support the participation of those 3 workshops, of the participant to these 3 workshops. The first one will really be like a presentation of the different tools and methods we have at hand, and we will propose to you to use in the context of this support offer. The second workshop will be after a few days. We leave you with the tools, we leave you with the method. You have a look on your side and you pick up the one or the ones you decide that you're going to use in the context of this run. And we come again together in the context of a workshop number 2, where the requirement there will be to have some kind of a score produced by one of the tools or the methodologies that we will register in the register altogether as the score at the beginning of the challenge. And then after that, we'll start a phase offline with where the people in FAIR Impact can provide support, can answer emails, can of course do Zoom on demand, things like that to help with the methodology and tools that we have proposed. And then eventually we'll resume in a final workshop where we will recall together the tools or methods and then register the score and measure all together the advancement that were achieved by each participant, and probably exchange around all of that with the group. Overall, the idea is basically you come with some artifacts, and throughout the 3 or 4 weeks of the support offer, and then you get an improvement in your level of fairness of your resource. Well, that's more or less overall it. The key idea is that we can accept, in terms of applicants, different kinds of research objects, but depending on the type of research object you will come in and participate, we might not necessarily apply the same methods and tools. As I said, some method and tools are dedicated to some object, like semantic artifact. That is for us an important aspect in the context of FAIR Impact. But if you come also with generic object like a data set, then we have tools like Fuji or other methods that can be called. So part of the first workshop will be try to elaborate what are the most important or the most appropriate method for your method or tools for the resource that you bring in the support offer. Well, I think I've done more or less the big presentation. I hope it was understandable, a little bit live, but
no, I think that's perfect. Thanks, Clement. That was a good summary of what's on offer. And as I'm sure people have seen, Sarah shared on screen the page on the website that has the kind of details all in writing there. I don't see any questions so far, but as I said, we do have a section at the end of the session for any questions that people might have. So as I said, feel free to add in any questions you might have for Clement or for anybody who's presenting on anything to do with the open calls when you have them. So I guess if Clement, if that's your presentation complete, I can hand over to Stian and we can get started with the support offer.
Good to me, and we'll come back on question right after.
Great, perfect. Stian, the floor is yours.
Well, as eloquent as Clement, so I have prepared some slides. So if you can all hear me, I'll just continue now. So where this second support offer is combining two different technologies, or more like approaches. The first one is signposting. Signposting came out of the motivation of we seeing lots of scholarly work and other resources on the web typically have web landing pages, the good old landing pages. They're very great for humans, but not so good for machines because they're stuck with some text to navigate. And programmatic access therefore means you need lots of specific knowledge about the particular repositories. So signposting is one approach for making those easier to navigate for machines and still acknowledging we have these landing pages, but trying to improve that to make it more fair. And so we can think of that as a kind of overlay, lightweight API just for navigating the resources of a scholarly object. So the second technology we're bringing in here is RO-Crate. So this is for the motivation of scholarly objects themselves are complex. Now they are made of many different parts that have different histories and attributions. Will be many parts of a data set, computational aspects. And these are often stored in many different repositories, which brings lots of different identifiers and metadata scattered around and often locked down by whatever is the capabilities of those repositories. Now, RO-Crate gives a more developer-oriented way to package up the metadata and the data together and adding in context and provenance and so on. And with thinking of this as some kind of platform-independent way of exchanging scholarly objects. Now, the argument in this support offer is that these two go well together. It's like a match made in heaven, said Herbert. And this combination means that we can make the scholarly resources easier to navigate from machines and get an unambiguous way to access all the metadata and the content. So you may have heard about content negotiation and say, hey, what about that? And I'll show you just in this example here now. So this is the status we have today. Persistent identifier, you may have heard of that, redirects to some landing page. So let's take, in the risk of going very meta about metadata, I'm now going into the DOI for this very slice that you're looking at now. If you click that today, you get a landing page at Zenodo, right? So very good repositories. Or you need to follow one more link and then you get the PDF. And of course, that's hidden inside the user interface somewhere. Now, you may be able to find somewhere in there that these are the identifiers for the authors. So that's me and Herbert. And you might, if you hunt down in the bottom, you even find some metadata in a machine readable format, but again, hidden inside the web page, right? And if you play well with DataSite, you might actually get directly to the metadata, but it's not quite the same metadata as the repository itself will get because it has more limited view over it. Now, the signposting is making all these things explicit. So we have this very small set of relations that you can add to as links out from the landing page using HTTP link header. So you may have heard about the link header before because we use it to get the style sheets up on all our web pages. And these are additional relations that we use for the particular purpose I just said. So in practice, it could look something like this, where we have the persistent identifier listed with cite as, the author as author, metadata is described by, and then we can specify the type of that, and even type the object and the item. And that's it. There's nothing more. We're not going to, build a massive graph out of it. It just subset because it's only for navigation. And since this is at the link level, you can apply directly at HTTP. You don't need to change anything in your templates or whatever. Now, if we combine this together, this is why it's interesting for me coming from the RO-Crate perspective, because we need a way to find the RO-Crate. So if we have a data package for everything nicely together, that's brilliant. But how do I know that? Well, you need a navigation to it, and that's where the signposting comes in. So it could be directly to the metadata, or it could be to an archive that then again includes some metadata inside. And that's the core aspect we have in RO-Crate, because we want the data to move along with its metadata, so it doesn't lose all the valuable information and identifier they have captured. And another aspect is that you can go the other way around. So from a particular resource, from a download, from a PDF, can you go back again to the landing page? Can you go back again to the identifier? Because those are the files you often find in Google search results, for instance, right? But now they're kind of parentless because you don't know where they belong anymore. And of course, they might be in weird formats that don't have the capabilities to provide that metadata, but it could be provided in the signposting level. And so that's what we want you to try to work on in this support offer. If you want to go fully advanced, you can even look at building collections of links here. So if you have a collection of objects, you may have many different ways to expose that. We propose you do that also with the signposting, and then you can have all these links gathered together in the document of itself. And you see the same relations appearing here, but this time in the JSON format. So it's more easy to consume when you have loads of them. Now, just a quick look into similar way of how we're doing it in RO-Crate. The RO stands for research object, by the way. So it's about capturing the scholarly output or really any kind of digital object. So we use linked data, but it's kind of, we don't want people to think too much about that. So it's just, we just add this JSON LD thing in the top, and everything else follows pretty boring JSONs below. So we describe ourselves, we have some grouping of things. In this case, we have several data entities, part of this crate. Some of them are just files, some other are references to something else there. And then you add this context on the side there. And then you can describe each of those. And this is where you can put more metadata, things that don't fit in the repository, because then you can expand and do the author is this person that has this affiliation, and then same, you can add in instruments and so on. So this is the motivation for RO-Crate. So you see we're using all these linked data standards, and what we want to do in this support offer is to marry these together closely. You see RFCs for the link set, of course, web technologies for the RO-Crate. So let's look quickly at the offer, what we're trying to get some help with. So we want to enable both discovery and consumption of content and metadata using these two together. So for instance, if you are already maintaining or developing a repository or our academic publisher, maybe you've already, while you were bored of my slides, already added those headers to your web server, because then we can provide a machine navigation explicitly. And it can go both ways, as I said. The most important one is, of course, from the landing page, but the back resources can be even more useful. And RO-Crate can be both an input and export format for your repository, because we have the general metadata formalized, so you can pick up the bits you need and integrate it into your repository, or likewise export it out again. And if you're an academic publisher, of course, this will be particularly interesting because you can combine these two approaches. Now, what if you're more of a kind of tooling implementer? You're already doing some linked data stuff. Now we do have some client libraries for Python and Ruby. They're not perfect. They are like the first version we have done, and they might need additional features that you will find, or maybe you want to integrate them with some existing software. Maybe there's some other programming languages you want to have a go at doing this. Doing that client library just took like 2 weeks of effort, so it should be possible to do it similarly in other programming languages. Similarly for RO-Crate, we have lots of libraries already. Many of them are driven more for creating crates rather than consuming it. So more might be needed on consuming, particularly if you are knowledge graph background. You may want to help us with building integration there. And that could be, for instance, a tool as well that says, follow all that thing I said, climb down the navigation from the persistent identifier, give me the RO-Crate, give me the knowledge graph in the end, maybe convert it to something, or maybe even make a tool, because when not all the repositories are going to buy in immediately, so we say, well, we can have an outside tool that can do that conversion of the metadata for you and do the deposit for you. Or maybe you are already a data platform that is already integrating lots of linked data, in which case we're looking for integration of this in your existing source code or platform. It could be a third-party open source project you want to contribute to because you already know about their code. And it could be particularly on the consumption side, we're looking for and having to do that kind of navigation, as I said there, programmatically. And it might be you already are doing content negotiation, and things like what Clement was talking about will already have faced that problem with, oh, I got 3 different metadata resources when I try to content negotiate. How do I know which one? How do you even know they exist? Well, now if you have used the signposting, you can help that to understand these in advance rather than guessing after the fact. And maybe help build aggregated knowledge graph if you have a collection of these. And then, because I'm a provenance person, I will also hope for some provenance about how these graphs were then gathered. But these are different kind of ideas of the kind of things we're hoping you do. So kind of each proposal would do 1 each or 2 maybe. There's also a kind of outreachy part you could help with, so demonstration purposes. So help us explain what I just said, but maybe in a more practical form where you have tutorials or you put a notebook, something like that, to help bring the message out about how to do this. Help us develop training material. It could be you already experienced with doing this or want to integrate with existing training materials like the FAIR cookbook. Or maybe even community support, because you are linked to some particular community that might be relevant for them to take up these technologies. So while you're in the period, it's the kind of support we want to provide you, because it's kind of a two-way thing. You're helping us help you in a way, right? So I've already started a Slack channel, which I think is being leaked, the link to in the chat already. And that's in case you want to ask questions about how you should put these things together for your proposal. And once we get started, this is how we want to collaborate with you and also maybe with each other. So because you might be that 2 different partners are doing 2 different aspects that can work together. We're going to have weekly office hours, so you can go more in depth with debugging and so on. And of course, we could also do emails. Roughly the timeline, I'm ready to be corrected by Ryan here, is I think is by June you have to have submitted, and then we'll hear more about that later. But if we start, then after the summer, we'll have a quick introductory session, basically what I said now, but at half speed. And then we'll kick off, and then you start developing the ideas of what you want to work with. And then you commit and start making something that we can demo. Now, we've said kind of 15 to 30 hours on there. So the smallest is the 5 days of effort altogether for one of these. But it could be you want to combine them, and then you could up to double what you want. But nominally 5 days of effort, minus, of course, the mandated activities I just mentioned. But we want to do it in the kind of hackathon style, so you're not just sitting isolated alone, but you also working with each other and developing the ideas together with us. So it's not just a one-off thing, but it gives us a good demonstrator that we can then build on and show to others. So part of this is also reporting later, where we'll draft the report and you just help us correct where we were wrong. So that's pretty much it for me, and now I'm open for questions.
Thanks, Jan. That was really informative. I don't see any questions specifically on your presentation there yet, but I assume I will. So as I said, now people can add their questions in as we go along, and we can pick them up towards the end. I think next, Sarah, I can hand over to you and you can present on the application process and the platform that will be used.
Yes, thanks, Ryan. Can you just confirm you can see my slides?
Yep.
Okay, great. So here I am. So I'll be very brief. So as you've learned, all the information about these open calls and the upcoming ones will be accessible from the FAIR Impact website. So from the main menu, I mean, you can access the open calls page, and from there you will be linked to the open calls grants platform. That's the place where you will be asked to complete your application and when the entire process will be managed. So whether you are in the main page or in the page dedicated to each of the support actions, you'll find a link that so far only says more information coming soon, because the call will open officially on the 31st of March, so this Friday. There is a single sign-on authentication mechanism, so we kindly ask you all to sign in first on the FAIR Impact website, because that's where we gather all your personal data related to yourself, your institute, which will be saved and used also during the application phase. So once you will be logged in and you will have access to the grants platform, this is the homepage, the dashboard that you'll see. The grants platform is used, as Ryan mentioned, for all the FAIR Impact open calls. So in this moment, they are all closed because the open call for champions has been closed some days ago, while the 2 open calls for support will be launched on Friday. So you'll see this in green, so there's no way you can not choose the right one. There are 2 different open calls, 1 per support actions. And in the course of the project, you will see more coming up. So once you've chosen the one you want to apply to, you join the page where the application form is, which appears like the form you see on the right side of the screen. So the application will be run completely through the grants platform. You can select one of the 2 calls you want to apply, and you fill the form one by one. You can save the application as a draft, so you can join the application many times before completing your final application. Just remember to do so by the deadline by clicking the final submit button. I said that also the evaluations will be done via this platform in a fair and transparent process. So using the information that you will have gathered, there will be a group of evaluators from the project who will assess your application with both a scoring mechanism, so with the scores on a numerical format to provide a ranking, and then the evaluators will also reach a full consensus via a consensus meeting. And the summaries, I mean, of this evaluation can be available to applicants upon request in a second moment. What you will be asked to complete. So the first part of the form is contains a series of information about yourself, the applicants. So we ask you again participant's name and also who is the lead participant in case a team is applying. This is because we understand that sometimes the person who is filling in the application might not be the same that is leading the team. So that's why we ask this information twice. The gender, we always try to have a gender balance situation. The organizations applying, since there might be more. The discipline you work with, and if you have any website to point to. Then we ask, where is your organization and or service based? Because as you know, we are only allowed to fund to provide financial support to participants in the European Union countries or in associated countries. I saw there was a question about that as well before. So associated countries can be eligible for support. And then if you want to add any other participants to the action, given that the support will be the same in irrespective of the number of participants. And then you have a series of simple, I would say the application is anyhow, simple questions that relate to the support action that you will have selected. So in case of support action number 1 on Fair Impact Fairness Assessment Challenge, so the one that Clément presented, there would be one main question that is, please indicate how many and which semantic artifacts and or data sets you will bring to this support action and why you are selecting this in particular. So this is the main, let's say, question that you will have to present in your application. The second part of questions relate to impact and dissemination. They are valid for both the actions, as you'll see, and they are also very relevant because all the outcomes of these open calls will have to, let's say, have a greater benefit for the research community at large. So that's why we ask you to foresee some dissemination actions after the support will be received. So we ask you how to describe how you anticipate participating in the support action will impact your project, describe how this support action will support wider adoption and uptake in your field, of course, with respect to the tools, methods, and solutions employed. And also, please describe how you will disseminate the results of your participation in this support action. So we ask you to be proactive in this sense already in the application phase, and this will be part of the evaluation. For the support action number 2, enabling FAIR Signposting and RO-Crate for the content metadata discovery and consumption, so the one that Etienne just presented. Again, we have one principal question that relates to outline how you or your colleagues meet the person specification outlined in this support action. With respect to, I mean, the knowledge as of developer, information architect, or any experience with JSON or schema.org, I mean, bringing why we should give you that extra mile that allows you to perform and use these methodologies in the best way. And then again, you'll have a series of questions that will ask you to explain how you're going to sort of disseminate this across your teams and your communities. Last but not least, you will be asked to confirm your availability to give an exit interview after the support will be provided. So you will be asked to participate in this interview because on the support provided, FAIR Impact will design and disseminate a series of implementation stories. And of course, you will be asked to contribute to that since you represent one of those implementation stories. And then after the completion, let's say, of the support, you will be also asked to help with a follow-up survey, a questionnaire, to understand what's the impact of this support after a few months of the delivery of the support. And that's it from my side.
Thanks, Sarah. I think it's really, I hope that cleared up any questions people might have about the application process or anything like that. So as I said, we have space now at the moment for any questions that people might have. Let's put up a big question mark on my screen. So yeah, so there was a few questions already posted in the chat. I'll try and drag them up if my browser allows me to do it. And thankfully, or hopefully we'll be able to answer a few of them already. So the first one was answered in the text here, one from Jenny O'Neill, just on the first open call. I think, Clément, you've helpfully answered that in the question, but I think, or in the text, it'd be good just to kind of answer it again for everybody. So Jenny was wondering, is how what would you anticipate is the time commitments needed for the organization applying for the first open call? as you said, it's about 5 days worth of effort. So as Clement says, kind of in between the different workshops, there might be some additional questions or additional time spent on the activities, depending on the kind of the level of fairness you want to get to. We're kind of for the first open call and for the second, coincidentally, both are around 5 days worth of effort required for both.
Yeah, maybe Ryan, just to add one sentence on this answer, but the key idea of a fairness assessment is to improve the level of fairness. So don't tell anyone that I told you that, but if you come with a resource that is super bad, super not fair, then getting the first point, making it fair at the beginning will be easier than making it fair if it's already super fair, making even more fair. I mean that if your resource doesn't have a license, you come to the workshop and we figure out that you don't have a license, then we're going to help you add a license. It might take you a few months to actually decide which license you want, but if you know the license you want, putting that in the file will take you 2 minutes. Making another statement that makes your data interoperable with a bunch of other one, or following a standard in your community in order to get fair might be a little harder than just picking up a license. So it's that message that I wanted to explain. And what will be interesting in the challenge is that we will evaluate the difference between the level of fairness at the beginning of the challenge and at the end of the challenge, and that will be the difference that will be pride of, let's say. But of course, the higher you are in the scale in terms of fairness assessment, we know the difference will be harder to get if you already are the super score of fairness at the beginning of the workshops.
And as I said in the second support offer, about 5 days should be sufficient to do one of these challenges. But if you find a good way to combine more than one, you can list that in your application and up to 10 days of effort. Of course, that would be the challenge for us, how to find a combinatoric in the end there.
Thanks, Wolf. So there was another question. I lost it here. Oh yeah, so a question from Zefi Cavadia on the just wondering about the funding of the assessment, and is it payable to organizations or to individuals? So yes, it's payable to both the organization or to an individual or a team of individuals. But as we said, so when you're making your application, you need to list the organization you're working with. So so we can prevent any sort of conflicts of interest around that. So we're, one of the stipulations is that people who are employed at organizations that are one of the project partners won't be eligible for funding. As well as that, just another thing to make clear on that is that the sort of the funding provided is based on the amount of effort that's needed, rather than the amount of people that will be involved. So if you have a team of 3 people, you'll be dividing the funding between those 3 people rather than getting 3 times the funding. That makes sense. There was Zeki, I think you had just another point to raise. Actually, if anyone wants to would prefer to sort of answer that question in person, just please feel free to pull up your hand. You should have a kind of pull up your hand function in the chat. So please feel free to do that, and we can give you speaking permissions. So another question, Zefi, from Zefi, I think for you again, Clement. I'll just read the question out. Is it possible to indicate a more open selection of data sets or artifacts at the moment of submission, with the possibility of making some changes later to the final set? So if yes, will it be allowed to only change or to add more?
I would say yes, up to a certain level. So when you write down the proposal, you can include you can be quite flexible on the resource you rebrought in. But as Sarah said, by the moment we start the process, then we're gonna need to know the resources that you're really competing with in order to write them down, at least on a paper somewhere, and say, oh, for that resource, the level of fairness at the beginning of the workshops was 20, and then going back to that after 4 weeks, what's the new score? But you might use also the week between the first and second workshop, where after we presented the tool and you will be deciding which tool you select for your resources. I mean, there might be a lot of flexibility on, oh, we've decided that we will evaluate on that ontology or on that artifact rather than on this one. I will assume that assuming that if the big rule of the game are not changed, then it makes sense to continue to introduce some flexibility here, with the overall objective as a group that the level of fairness of the resources you bring in are improved. So whatever you bring, the key idea is to improve the level of fairness of what you bring.
And just I'm skipping ahead of one of the questions here, but I think so. I see a thumbs up in the screen here. So just there's a question from Bjorn here, Clement. I think it might be for both Stian and Bjorn. But how are we assessing the level of fairness?
I haven't seen that one in the chat or in the, but no worries, I can go back on that. So on the web page in the offer letter, we describe 4 or 5 tools and methodologies for which we give certain reference, and then we'll extensively present them during the first workshop. Those tools and methods will will be presented. It will demonstrate the methods they apply and all their works in order to evaluate the level of fairness of a resource. So that will be sought out at the beginning of the first workshop. So in theory, for the applicants, you don't need any more or any important or very important knowledge on FAIR to participate. You can just be sensitive to that and say, oh, I want to get better in FAIR, and then join the open calls, and we'll help you walk through that.
Thanks. And I see there was another question from Borja, who I think Clem or Stian, you've answered it here in the chat already. So the question was just, are the solutions provided dependent on the repository service that the team is working with? For example, if the repository is hosted in Figshare, would some changes need to be implemented by them instead of the developer team? So I see, Stian, you've answered that in the chat.
Yeah, so I tried to say that because it would be hard if you're not the maintainer of the repository code to add changes to the code. But of course, if it's open source, you're able to do so. Although we would be happy for you to also work with pushing such commercial providers into adding the support, but I'm not sure we can give money for that lobbying, right? Unless you count that as part of that outreachy part that I mentioned before.
And just a quick addition also on that question, also with respect to offer number 1. Indeed, that's a relevant question. There are at least one tool that we are proposing called OFAIR that is linked to a couple of ontology repositories. By the time the open call will be there, we'll have OFAIR in 2 or 3 or 4 ontology repositories that you could use. Worst case scenario, we will ask between the first and second workshop to upload your resource, your ontology, if this is a semantic artifact, in one of these tools as a private resource, so no one can see it if it's not appropriate for the repository to host it, and we'll be able to use it. Except OFAIR, that is a software that is being developed for semantic artifact and embedded in those repositories of semantic artifact, then the others are not necessarily linked to an ontology to a repository. So that's the only constraints we have.
Okay, thanks both for really thorough answers to the questions. I don't see there's one question open in the question just I'm speaking here from Panagiotis Andreou. So I'll just read it out loud. I'm not sure who it's for yet, but our team represents the S3 Slices RI project. We are currently in the preparatory phase, and we would like to assess the design of our FAIR enabling mechanisms. Is the call applicable for us? So I hopefully I can answer that. Well, just from general terms, Panagiotis, I'm not familiar with the project, but I imagine the call is applicable to you. I see, Stian, you're nodding your head, so maybe in terms of the actual content of your guys' support action might be a bit more aligned to the offer of the support action that you guys are offering. I don't know that either Clement or Stian, do you think from the description here, or if you have any familiarity with this project, if it's if you think it might be suitable?
Yeah, in terms from offer 2 side, I mean, even integration in architectural preparatory stage would be in scope. Yeah, but of course we would hope to have something demonstratable by the time we come, say, November.
And just to be sure, sorry, because I writing in the chat, we are answering Panayotis Andreou's question. That's it.
That's right. Yeah.
Just so with respect to the resources to the S3 Slice RI project, well, I will say we'll expect probably for you, but I'm assuming if you're on S3, to bring in a couple of resources that you already have, either semantic artifact that you are using in the context of Slice, or a data set that you produce in the context of this, that will help you as a let's call it a prototype. Maybe it could be your prototype data set that you bring into the open call, and you will use as a demonstrator potentially on your side after in the implementation of your project, or you will turn the lessons learned in the context of the open call into your implementation in the future for all of the resources of your S3.
There's one question. Sorry.
If I may, Ryan, Rita here. I see we have a hand raised from the audience, so maybe should we give opportunity? So I'm going to give permission to talk to Borat Luzhat. I hope I said your name properly. So you should have permission now to talk, Borat. Can you try to speak now?
Thanks, Rita.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, we do.
Hi. Yes, I think so. I raised my hand actually because I thought I did not understand the answers, but I think I do. And maybe at this point, I just want to confirm. So I asked the question whether working with, not open source repository providers like Figshare would be acceptable. And as far as I understood, for the offer 2, it might be a bit difficult because we will be suggesting concrete changes to the repository and whether it fits with their way or with their sort of plans for how they manage the repository might not work. But for offer 1, it is possible apart from one of the tools. And that was the FAIR tool. So for any changes or any actions to be implemented in repositories hosted by, for example, Figshare, we could apply for open call 1. Is that correct?
Clement or Sian, are you able to answer that?
So on my side, I apologize, Borat, because at the very beginning of the question, I get a support offer number 2. So I went back to the chat to read if others' message were there. Can you make it back for me if this is also addressed to offer number 1? Very quickly.
So your answer, I saw 2 answers to my question, and the first answer is for offer 2, so from Stian, and he says that if the repository is not open source, such as Figshare, you could propose changes to Figshare, but maybe it's not very in line with the goals of the call. And for offer 1, that was your answer, Clement. The only tool that is repository dependent or repository provider dependent is FAIR. But then, for example, you could work with Fuji and assess the fairness of datasets with Fuji, even if they're hosted in Figshare. And if you would want to make changes, you could using any other tool or resources that you or your expertise would provide.
Yeah, so I confirmed the response. Thanks for repeating. And the key idea will be that we'll also help you to sort that out through the first workshop. So the tools or the methodologies that are the most appropriate, depending also on your experience with FAIR or the level of I don't want to say technical involvement or things like that.
Well, luckily I'm not alone, so that will be okay.
But you can, it is also possible, and that's a question that's a response that I address also to everyone. It's also, we also have things like the FDMM, for example, methodology, which is a self-assessment method that you can take your spreadsheet and then decide if yes or no. And that's something also you can apply to your resources by yourself on your side. And then the key idea is to, after, demonstrate how you've been able to improve that. If you're doing a self-assessment method, which is okay in the context of the open course, then we'll go with you and see what have changed. If you're doing an automatic method that actually score, then we'll measure out the score. The methods will have the tool will tell us the new score.
Yeah.
But in all cases, we'll go through all of that during the first workshop, helping the typically you mentioned Bora, you just mentioned Fuji. Fuji is a resource that we can apply on different kind of research objects, and they don't need to be on a specific repository. So you can potentially consider to apply that on the object in Figshare, but you can also have maybe because of the type of resource, a better tool or something that will fit a little bit more that you can also apply in parallel.
Could you suggest what other tool would be more fitting from the resources on the sort of information page? Because
no, not really at this point, but not really.
Because it would be easier for us to also assess how we want to improve, right? So that would be a good.
But that's also a commitment we don't really ask you to have before the beginning of the action, I will say.
I see. Okay.
It sounds like just the right kind of question we want to have in the initial workshop, right?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Whoever wants to skip in, I just want to clarify your point on we're not saying option 2 is not for commercial approaches. We do allow that, of course, if you are one of those vendors or have a collaboration agreement with them. Yeah. Herbert want to chip in something?
No, you just basically said, Steen, what I wanted to, I mean, I would be actually thrilled if Figshare would implement signposting and RO-Crate, but it would have to involve their developers, of course.
Thank you, Herbert. Thank you, Herbert, and thank you, Bora, for your question there. I know we missed it for a few minutes. So we are a few minutes over time, I'm afraid. I don't see any new questions in the chat, thankfully. But so we're not, thankfully, so we're not missing out any questions. Thank you again to everybody for all the attendees. First of all, thank you for attending and joining us and stimulating the discussion with your questions. Thanks obviously to the presenters as well. So the next stage, I guess, as we said, the open calls will open on Friday of this week, so on 31st. And we'll be just distributing information about that through the various kind of social media channels, and obviously they'll be open via the website. So we hope you are encouraged by the session today to apply. And as if you think of any questions that you might have formulated in your head after the end of the session, there is an open calls at FAIR Impact.eu email address, a specific email address on the open calls webpage where you can contact us directly, and we can hopefully answer any questions that you might have. So I will wrap up the session now. Thank you again, and hopefully we see some applications from you in the next couple of months. Bye now.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.